Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 29 of the Unchained Vodcast. We have today our usual crew, myself, Brand, and Kriss are
Howdy,
here.
howdy.
Hey there.
And reaching out to you, how is everybody doing in chat?
Doing well. I'm doing well. Chat.
I already talked to y'all,
Fantastic.
so.
His ears.
But want to see how chat's doing, how everybody's doing. You had a good week. What did you think of the weekly wrap up we had? Just let us know. Get some chat going on in there. Today's topic is Camelot Unchained and the future of PvP MMOs. Specifically, we're going to look at game development in general, whereas it relates to Camelot Unchained. What sort of things do we think that they've done that modern MMOs haven't or don't do as a general rule? What are some things that essentially are new? Maybe not new to MMOs period, but new to modern MMOs, something that isn't really in current practice anymore, at least. And then we're also going to look at things that they've done that are kind of new in modern PvP and RVR for MMOs, and just going to look at some things that we think either other games might carry forward and adopt for themselves in their development or their PvP features or whatever, and some things that we might want to see in other games and some things that maybe we don't want to see. So, without much further ado, Bran, Kriss, chat,
Yeah.
what are some
Let's get started.
things that you think City State Entertainment has done that are new, at least for modern MMOs?
The
This is
air
game
system.
development. Game
The air
game
system.
development.
Yeah.
Not features. We're talking game development here.
What-
Well, the first
They gotta mess with
and
you.
main thing for me is transparency
Yes.
in terms of communication, the constant streaming, the constant communication with the player base. I think it comes also with the Kickstarter type of games. The crowd-funded games
Mhm.
need to communicate a lot more because they have most of them, the player base has a direct access to the studio,
Mhm.
so they need to communicate
Yeah.
more to bring more revenue, because if you have a publisher, they give you a budget and you have that. For crowdfunding, if you don't communicate, you don't get money.
Yeah, and I think going along with the crowd, both of those really, the crowdfunding and the transparency, the team has been not just transparent, but very communicative with the the people who have crowdfunded and asking questions.
Yeah.
Is this something you want to do? They have a set goal, but they're still kind of getting feedback and asking questions and being completely willing to add or remove things that are not working.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
agree. That's the sort of thing that, I mean, I guess you don't absolutely have to have with crowdfunding, but I think it's very important as a part of the crowdfunding to have that open communication. And honestly, it's something that I've just wanted from MMO development in general for ages, and I think a lot of us have
Yes.
and wanted them to be more open and communicative, and they've continually refused to. And Camelot Unchained was one of the first successfully funded like MMOs from crowdfunding. It wasn't the first. I think Star Citizen edged in by 6 months or so before they did.
Yeah.
But still, it was one of the very first to actually really drum up any significant money from that method.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is, though, when we come to that part, it is also a double-edged sword,
Mhm.
because they've been given a lot of backlash
Mm.
for taking too long to develop the game. But
And for being
at the
honest
same
about
time,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can't. The thing is, I think a lot of people, as time goes by, and I think that's how they're really gonna change the MMO, not just PvP, but MMO scene, is that people will start realizing just how long it takes to develop an MMO. Because most previous MMOs we've seen, since the beginning of MMOs, we've only heard about it the last year or two, maybe, before release. But you never realize just how many years before that it started being put in development.
Yes.
With CU and with the crowdfunded games, you start realizing just how long it takes and how much things change along the development chain. So I think they're going to change the landscape for that reason also.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a transparency thing. I think it is almost entirely a crowdfunding thing, because even the crowdfunding games who are a little or a lot less communicative with their funders or backers, those ones are also seeing pushbacks and delays.
Yeah. And chat, I would actually like to hear what some of you think about their communicativeness, how open they've been, and how you feel about that. I did want to add, because that was something I wanted to bring up as well, is it's been kind of a mixed bag, both how open they've been with the community. Because in some ways, on the one hand, I feel it has helped to create a lot of backer loyalty. Because I think the backers who have stayed around, certainly not everyone, but some people, some of us really appreciate that. I actually increased my backer level probably 6 months to a year after I originally backed the game,
Same.
specifically because they kept being honest and open with us. And if they hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have increased my backer level. I wouldn't have had the faith in them to do that. But because they kept giving us information, they kept opening up and talking more about it, I was willing to commit more to the project because I felt a lot better, more comfortable with it. But on the other hand, there have certainly been several times where they've opened up and said, okay, well, we've got this problem, and we're going to delay beta or whatever else. And, if they hadn't communicated that to people for another 6 months, then maybe, they probably could have held on to some of those people. Because it certainly does seem that every time they actually acknowledge that there's an issue, then people start to back out and ask for refunds and everything, even though it's been obvious there is an issue. Because the game's obviously not out at that
Delayed,
point. It's obviously delayed. Even before they announced the delay, we're sitting there going, it's we haven't heard anything about these features yet. And they probably could have mitigated the loss somewhat by not telling us, but they told us anyway. And so there is kind of a give and take there for that. Let's see. Arbicus is actually against open communication and crowdfunding. I'm actually with you on the crowdfunding thing. To some degree, I'm not a really huge fan of crowdfunding for major game projects like MMOs and stuff. I'm not a big fan of it.
That's where my opinion diverges for one main reason. Time and again, publishers have proven that they are short-term,
corporate,
short-sighted. It's not even corporate, because everybody's here to make money. They make games because they're passionate about it, but they're here to make money. You don't make a game to lose money. But all publishers, and you've seen that, I haven't seen yet an MMO release in a good state. Why? Because publishers are short-sighted. They're not gamers. They're not professional of the industry. They're accountant. They're investors. All they see is the short-term return on investment, and that's short-sighted, and that's not how the MMO model works. So for me, publishers and big companies backed games have proven that they're not the way to go, because you make MMOs that are all standardized. First, it doesn't encourage innovation, and two, the models are not done towards the player but towards the revenue.
Yeah.
And that's not how an MMO should be. And that's why you have, especially with the scene you have now, that's why people hop from an MMO to the other every 3 months rather than older MMOs where, because you didn't have also as much diversity, people stayed a lot longer. But the MMOs, the older MMOs, where the publishers were had more faith and didn't know how fast they could get their money back, they gave more freedom to the developers to make the game. So the game released more finished, and people were more stayed more longer in those MMOs.
Okay. Well, I have to say, I have a issue. I do have an issue with crowdfunding for major gaming projects, not just MMOs, major gaming projects as a whole. I do feel that I do feel like open communication is something I've always wanted from game developers, and I do think it's something that is desirable. I also acknowledge Arbicus's point that some developers certainly do try to appease everybody. You know, they go, okay, well, I still got to make my bottom line. I still also got to appease these backers and throw stuff at them. And I do think that there are both constructive and less constructive ways to have that conversation, and you certainly don't want, as Arbicus actually just said, you certainly don't want to be just trying to appease people. And that's one thing that I like about Camelot Unchained. I don't feel like they do that a lot, because they started off with certain very well-defined statements of what they wanted to do with the game, and they keep reinforcing that. And if someone goes, hey, we really want you to do this, and they're like, well, that we said right here, we're not going to do that. So we're not going to do it. Otherwise, they'll consider it, and I think that is wise. I mean, if a lot of people want something,
and I think there's that list of things they want and the list of things they don't want. They're staying away from those don't want things, period, and willing to change the things that they do want to make them better or to remove them completely because they just didn't work the way they were hoping.
Yeah, and I think to a large extent that communication is very important for developing a more loyal fan base. As Travis said, there's been a lot of crowdfunded projects that have been vaporware, which is part of the reason I don't like the crowdfunding. For me, it's not that I want crowdfunded project. Obviously, that's not the case. I back Star Citizen. I backed Camelot Unchained. However, I have to have a certain degree of faith that the project's going to happen, and that requires some communication to me. And two, I really just need to watch and see what they're doing and be persuaded a fair bit to back into a game that early. Whereas my preference would be for them to develop and make the games, and then I buy them afterwards. I don't like this. I don't really like pre-order crap. I don't like early access crap. I don't like anything where I have to pay for the game before I can see the full completed game. I don't like it.
Yeah, but the crowdfunding is a bit different.
No, it's really not, because you actually have less of a game. But I do agree with you that a lot of the publishers are a serious issue, and some of the game developers are a serious issue. Honestly, I have a lot of issue with some of the things Star Citizen does, even though I back them.
And I do too, and I haven't backed it.
It was an age before I finally bit the bullet and backed them, because I couldn't stomach some of the things that they did. And finally, I was just like, but I really want to play the game, so I'll give them a little bit of money. But I do think that there are some serious issues, and I do think crowdfunding does help with some of that. But that's why I'm willing to back some of them, but I'm very wary of crowdfunding for major projects. For indie games, I love crowdfunding. I think it's fantastic. Indie developers especially, but when it's somebody that has the money and the capital to get financial backing to fund a game, I do get very wary of that sort of thing.
And that's where, again, my opinion diverges, because if you have a publisher, the appeasement is not towards the gamers, but towards the publisher by removing features, because it turns the developing cycle, it lengthens it. By making a dumbed down game, because it's going to appeal to a bigger crowd rather than making a niche game like CU is making. They said from the start, this game is not for everybody. We acknowledge it. We're not looking to have 10 million subs. We're looking to have enough subs to make the game viable and make money. Not make a fortune, but being able to pay the wages of everybody and have some return on their investment. They're not trying to be the new World of Warcraft like most games have been trying to do for the past decade. That's also why I think they're a major project, and they need to really blow up, basically, to really succeed in making that game and making a good game because they're
Mhm.
going to be the example that others will be able to follow and say, see, if you work that way, if you're faithful to your tenets, if you're honest with your backers, if you work to make a game that will please the audience, not everybody, but the audience you're trying to target it for, uh, it's going to succeed.
Yeah, you can make money like that. That's the point. That's
Yeah.
something that that needs to be acknowledged more. That there are ways, I think, for MMOs to make money, but not make ridiculous WoW money, and that's what I feel a lot of projects do aim for. They want that ridiculous WoW money, and they're not going to get it. I don't remember who said this on here, but kind of back to the point of today's topic. I do agree with whomever it was that said it, because it's scrolling up by now, that I don't think the open communication is something that's going to spread widely to other development projects. I wish it would. I do think it is something that is essential in crowdfunded projects, and I certainly think we will see a continuing open communication from crowdfunded projects. But from like publishers and their projects, I think there's too much. There's too much bureaucracy. They're not going to do it. Their publishers are going, shh, don't talk about that. That's for us. They don't need to know that.
That and on the scale of transparency, CU is probably a 10 out of everything I've ever seen in any MMOs.
Even
There's
if
never been
other
anyone
games,
I'm usually pretty happy with a 5.
Even if other games are transparent. For example, I backed Pantheon, and they're open in their communication, but they're not in any way as open as CU is, and I don't know any game. Crowfall is the same. I don't think they're as open on everything as CU is. CU is basically saying, aside from financial figures and some design concepts that they don't want stolen from them, everything that is thought about is visible.
Yeah,
on
I like those
the
questions.
streams.
You guys have played the alpha or those beta weekends, whatever. What do you guys know? Is like, go to the website. Everything we know is on there.
Exactly.
Everyone assumes that we know top secret stuff, and it's like we don't. It's all public, man. I got nothing for you.
The only difference we have as alpha backers
Seeing the graphics
to smaller backers, we see the graphics. That's all. We have our hands on the game more than others, but that's all. We have images. The rest of the informations are out there. There is nothing hidden. The NDA is just for not showing the pictures and not streaming it. Everything else is out in the open.
Now, one thing that Kriss, you kind of mentioned one thing that's kind of big for me in the development of the game and the direction of the game that is something I was gonna bring up later, but it's something I very much would like to see spread to other gaming projects, which is that they are targeting a niche market. They are not trying to milk as many people as possible to get as much money as possible in this project, because honestly, I like to call that the WoW direction, the WoW effect, and I think that is I think that not so much that other games are trying to copy WoW in their mechanics, but I think that they have that fiscal idea from WoW that they can get these huge swaths of people from all walks of life, and that is what has been ruining modern MMOs, because they're like, oh, we can get all these PvPers and PvEers, and what they end up is with a watered down game that sucks.
Well, yeah, to say in so many words.
Like Star Wars: The Old Republic. I enjoyed that game when it came out. The PvP was pretty generic, except for Hutball. The PvP was pretty generic, and I mean, you
that
basically
could be its own game that could take off in competitive, just competitive gaming.
Yeah, as just a little game, a small scale game that could have been fun. But the PvP, the battlegrounds and stuff. I mean, you basically could have just taken those, swapped them out for fantasy themes, and stuck them in WoW or some other fantasy game, and they would have worked out fine. People were like, well, I can already do this in other games. Why do I need to come here to do it? It's pretty generic. They basically copied gear progression and everything from other games. But then they had to mix it with the PvE stuff because they're like, oh, well, we've got PvE gear and PvP gear. Well, we can't have the people with PvP gear raiding in their PvP gear. That's absurd. So now we have to make up reasons why you can't. And every other game does that same stuff, and it drives me absolutely crazy.
Now we don't have to. We have a game that's just PvP. Doesn't care about stats and differences in schematics and the mechanics of the game. It's all the same mechanics. There's fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Well, we were actually, Sacrex was saying you should talk about the niche. That's exactly that. It is a niche game, and it's not going to appeal to everybody. Yes, there's a lot of people now in modern MMOs because everything is handed to you immediately as you log in the game. They're not used to longer sessions of gaming anymore. But I don't think they're completely against it. They're just not used to it. And I think if they have the objectives and the interest and the game is interesting enough, they are willing to spend more times in the game to get this achievement, to have a goal. Nowadays in MMOs, you don't have any goal because everything is given to you right away.
I actually disagree with what Sacrex is saying there. What I think he's saying that it's kind of stupid to target the niche market because you're targeting like older Daok players and stuff. See, I don't think that's the point. I think they are to some degree targeting older Daok players, and I would agree that that is a smaller population and possibly a diminishing population. But I think the basic concept around making a niche game is not to target the players of another game. The idea is to target people who would enjoy a more slower-paced, tactical, three-realm RVR game, which is what they're doing, because they're not just... Otherwise, they could just copy Daok, but they're not doing that. Much. They're not releasing Daok on a new server. What they're doing is they're taking some of the concepts people liked from that game, and then that's why they're adding so many new features that sometimes they get criticized for. People are like, you're adding too many new features, but they're trying to update that type of model to something that won't appeal to mass quantities of people, but will appeal to that RVR market, in my opinion. Because, they're looking specifically at the RVR market, and not even the entire RVR market, but they're looking at their specific people who really want a large-scale battle, that really want... and I'm not saying you're entirely wrong there. I do think that if they were to cater overly to the Daok players, that is a problem. I just don't think that's what they're doing, because I think we've seen a lot of backers that come into the game that have never played Daok. I have never played Daok. I don't give a crap about Daok.
That brings us kind of to the core of the topic. Is we're supposed to be talking more about the PvP aspect of it, and that there isn't a game out there that currently fuels that interest. And now they're making one. Now they're making a couple of them.
Exactly.
And the trending, we're talking about PvP trends and the future of PvP in MMOs, and what they're doing is they're trying to fill in a system of PvP interest that just has been kind of failing MMOs lately.
Yeah.
Oh, and I can agree with you, Sacrex, that they do have to have population to make the game good, and they've got to, and that's why they've got to cater to the general RVR market to a certain degree, but they can't cater to the entire RVR market, because otherwise, if every RVR game had to do that, Crowfall and Camelot Unchained would be the exact same thing. But by and large, they're not. They're catering to two kind of different combat styles.
Yeah,
I think.
I think the current trending PvP market is the small scale MOBA competitive gaming, with League of Legends, Heroes of the Storm, etc., etc. They're trying to fill in a different area that pulls into just general PvP, because we've played MMOs, bigger MMOs lately, that just the PvP just isn't there. It doesn't cater enough to them, or it just doesn't provide enough fuel to the fire for them to really enjoy it for a length of time.
Yeah, and that's the point. That kind of, to go back to what we're saying, like, or the as Brand said, the theme of the episode is, I do think, I can't guarantee the future, but I do think that Camelot Unchained, if it is successful, because we've seen that MMO developers do like to copy things that are successful.
Yes.
Because that just makes sense. If it is successful, I do think it will lead to a certain degree of other developers going back to some of these older MMO principles and trying to that CU is taking up and trying to bring them back, and maybe not everyone for sure. I mean, they're not all going to do that. No industry, everyone does the same thing. That would be ridiculous. But some of the developers may reach back and start going, okay, well, they kind of backpedaled on all this modern crap that has been causing us problems.
It worked.
And they worked out. They made some money. So maybe we can also do slightly more niche projects. Maybe we'll do a game that's nothing but PvE and raiding, and we'll go back to some of the old school projects, Pantheon, and we'll go back to some of these old school concepts and do things like, for instance, my last thing in development that I like that they're doing is the old school testing style. As I said, I hate early access. I hate paying for early access. I hate even though we kind of are to test, but it's not the same thing. Where a game's basically 90% done and there's getting people in there to test, and no one else has really been in internal testing before that. And I like that they're going back and getting the smaller populations in on the private tests. Slowly adding features. They're going through a lengthy alpha testing process and everything. Yeah. Which is, an alpha is actually alpha. It's not alpha.
Yeah. It is we have it open for 2 days this week. Maybe next week it will be, maybe next week it won't be, depending on who crashes the server next or what crashes the server next. And when we get in, we do see changes, subtle, sometimes large, but just changes. And you're just not logged in the entire time. Some betas are just open for like 3 months straight, every day for 3 months, and you don't see anything.
Mm-hmm. Now,
and to also play the devil's advocate, as Sakrik said, and I agree with that statement, if CU fails, it's going to be a major hit and a major backlash for the crowd-funded games.
Oh, yeah.
It's because right now CU is one of the most visible one, along with Star Citizen. If either of those or both of those fail, crowd-funded games are done for.
Well,
nobody will trust them anymore.
The other, and I won't say which one.
Well, I do agree with that. Not gaming in general on Kickstarter, but just MMOs themselves for Kickstarter. We've pretty much got 3 big projects: Camelot Unchained, Star Citizen, and Crowfall. There are some other ones like Pantheon, but they're just more recent. So you've really got these 3 projects that were kind of like the front line of Kickstarter MMOs, and I guarantee you, just based on what I've seen, 1 to 2 of those will fail. Just from the recent history of MMOs. And by fail, I don't mean that people won't play them at all. I just mean, they won't be nearly as successful as people expect them to be.
In my eyes, SWTOR failed, but it's still around. They still have servers up.
Yeah.
They
still have players.
Playing. They're still making some money. They just
Wallstar failed, and it's still open.
Exactly. So there's a difference between a game that people are still playing and a game that vastly overstated its expectations. And personally, I do fear Star Citizen may do that, because in some ways, I fear they're getting way too big for their britches, and I'm worried that they're not going to be able to pull off all that stuff.
The feature creep is what more worries me for Star Citizen.
But I do think it's possible that if 2 or more Kickstarter MMOs don't pan out very well and aren't very successors, that will definitely put a damper on people's enthusiasm for backing Kickstarter MMOs. I think game developers will still try and go, we're gonna do one, but I know if Camelot Unchained doesn't turn out very well, I'm not gonna be very willing to put money down for other MMOs.
No, big studios are gonna do it, but it's gonna be, if Star Citizen, CU, Pantheon, and Crowfall fail, or either, at least if half of them succeed, that's fine. If more than half of them fail, it's also the death of subscription-based MMOs.
Possibly. I mean, this is
Completely.
it.
Because already so many people say free to play is the way to go, and I hate
I
that.
hate free to play.
I hate free
Say
to
it.
plays with a
Don't say
passion.
it.
I do.
I do think there's a demographic that is associated with MMOs at this point in age. I don't see a lot of new people, and by new I mean people getting out of college, getting into
Mhm.
MMOs. They're more of the console based or just short
Yeah.
term gaming. So
Mhm.
MMOs currently I think target the older market, the market who has
Yeah.
been playing MMOs
Most of
for a
them.
couple years,
Yeah.
5 or more
There
years
there
ago.
are exceptions, but yeah, the main
Yeah.
target is older players.
So it's tough, I think, right now. In general, is what I'm trying to say. It's not an easy thing to make a new MMO that can hold the numbers that some
Yeah.
other MMOs have held.
And
Now, if we
I
can,
hate the current way of thinking. Make me want to give you money. I hate people keep saying that when, especially when you read the CU or the Pantheon Reddits. I've seen a lot of people saying, I don't want a subscription-based game because I want
Oh.
developers to make me want to give them money. Give me a cash shop that I want to invest in. No, that's not how it works. That's
Yeah.
not how it should work. That's
If
the new way of thinking. That's the free-to-play way of thinking, and that's something I hate.
I'm pretty sure that even the people who say that, give me something worth paying for, won't pay it once they have it because they have it. Why do I have
Yeah.
to pay for it? You just gave it to me.
Yeah.
Well, and
No.
that's I don't want to get too into it, but
No.
as I've said to y'all before, that's why my personal opinion is we've been paying $15 a month for sub fees for over 10 years now. It's time for the sub fees to go up, but people tend to pee themselves whenever at the idea that sub fees might go up to $20 a month. And honestly, I'm like, inflation is a thing. They probably do need to go up, but the game developers are terrified to do it, and so I think that's why they keep kicking it down to free to play, because they're afraid to bump the sub up. But with bumping the sub up, you do have to provide quality content.
Yeah.
But maybe if they're
But
getting
at the
paid
same
more,
time-
they can afford to.
That's also why I think CU can shape the future of MMO, because it's going to be a subscription-based game. If it succeeds, it shows that, again, something I have no
The
doubt
sub
about
can still
is
work.
that sub still works. And I'm sorry, but Sacrex brings a point that makes me mad every time. You're paying $15 a month for a game and you're not capable of playing it you're paying more for things you use even less most of the time in your daily life.
Yeah.
$15 is nothing. Even if you play 1 hour a day, that per day, that's nothing. And most people spend more than that in front of the computer.
There's a noodle place near my work that charges me like $16 for a bowl of noodles for lunch.
I was about to say, at this point, you can go to fast food places and spend $10 to $12 pretty easily
Yeah.
on one person. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into the price of things. That's not what we're here to debate. So if we can, I would like to segue into what is new about PvP and the game feature specifically. Yes, the air system. Brand, go ahead.
Air system?
Go ahead.
Wait. The ear system also?
The ear system? Oh, yeah.
The air in the ears?
No,
The air in the ears?
It's a great system in theory, the way they've talked about it. You don't see too many, if any, combat systems that have one, let alone the three different types of things in that the action, interaction, reaction. Some MMOs may have one of them, but not all three of them. And I think the interaction alone is just funny, or not funny, but amazing to think about, and how all these things work together. And I think that's just the biggest leap in general mechanically. You don't see things interact that way.
That's true. And I do think that goes to what some people said in chat, that the success of the game is going to be largely dependent on the combat system. And I think Air is one of those areas where they're trying to create a more modern and futuristic, more future-proof combat system. It's something that people haven't really done before to this extent. And by doing something like that, especially in a game that's primarily combat, it's all RVR. They don't have stories and stuff for you to follow and do, and little dungeons to raid. So you're really just going out there into the field, for most people except the crafters and maybe the scouts. You're going out into the field and you're finding people and you're hitting them with your sword, and you're going out in the field and you're finding people and you're hitting them with your sword. So when you hit them with your sword, it better be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and they've got the different levels of damage, you know, bashing, slashing, smash, you know, all these different types of damage too that you don't see that often. Most combat systems in MMOs are numbers.
Mm-hmm.
How much damage total, you know, value? Did I do 3,000 damage, 2,000 damage? No. Now I do slashing. What is your armor? What type of armor are you wearing? And is my attack based on you wearing that, or is you wearing leather or something else? You know, there's all sorts of different things that we're not used to seeing. It's no longer just a numbers game. And I think that's a major difference in Jump that if it works out, we might see others start to incorporate.
Yeah, and Sacrix brings up something about targeting the body parts and having the wounds and everything. That's another area which ties into something that Thantanos brought up, I believe it was, about how the game allows you to create your abilities. That's something that very few games have done, especially MMOs, allow you to create and customize your own abilities in a true way. That, again, goes back to the combat experience and making the combat experience rich so that people want to come in and play the game. And that is something I definitely would hope that other games will move forward to, making the combat more interesting. Without what I think the modern trend has been is to try to make the combat more interesting by making you jump around a lot and jump around and do flips and explode things and smash things with your hammer and have action combat. And CU's really not trying to do that. Instead, they're trying to make it interesting by making it complex, nuanced, having a sort of strategy to it, which I think is a very good thing. Now, Sacrix was saying that he's concerned about like the body part targeting because they're adding all these animations for something that they've even said if it doesn't work, they'll pull it from the game. And I think that's definitely a thing because they're putting a lot of work into an animation system for being able to target body parts and all kinds of things. But I do think even if they decide to pull wounds and targeting limbs with different attacks and stuff out of the game, I do think those animations are still totally viable for making the game richer and aren't a complete waste of time because, as they showed in one of the recent animation live streams, even if you're using an attack that doesn't target the leg, if you're just using a generic one, your attack animation will change. Sometimes you'll swing low, sometimes you'll swing high, sometimes you'll swing at the arm, so on and so forth. I do believe, anyway, that that's what he was getting at, is that if you're using a generic attack, you're just going to alternate between animations instead of always going for the leg. But if you're going for the leg, then it's going to go for the leg.
Yeah, and even if you generalize the damage, as I said in response to Sacrix, even if you scrap the body part wound system, it's still valid animations. It's just a diversity of animations that is going to do damage.
It'll be
That's
cool.
all. Yeah, it still looks cool, no matter if it actually does damage to a body part or to the general health pool of the target. If the animation looks cool, why scrap it?
Yeah. I mean, I agree that if it's without the wound system, those different animations are perhaps not entirely necessary, but even without the wound system, that'd be cool.
Yeah. And at that point, it's just kind of a little focus in animations that may be unnecessary. Maybe they're focusing a little of that too preemptively until they know exactly or more solidified what the PvP system will be, whether or not they're going to have the different body parts.
Mm-hmm.
But still cool. Animations are cool in general. But
yeah, now going to the combat experience, one of the things that they're doing that I think we can easily say no PvP MMO has done, and no modern PvP MMO has done, is the sheer scale of the battles.
Yes.
And going with
Others have
that,
tried.
yeah, and going with,
Yeah.
I was going to say, and going with that is their absolute dedication to performance, which no other games
Yes.
have really committed to in a very useful way.
No. Servers, for whatever reason, whether it's a server or on the engine's failure, they just can't handle, much more than 20v20, with everyone shooting different particles out and doing so many actions in one spot. And they're really trying to allow that on a much larger scale.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going into Star Wars: The Old Republic, which really kind of hyped itself up and hyped its PvP up before the launch. They were like, you're gonna be able to do all kinds of PvP in this game. We tried doing world PvP. Oh man, you get like 30 people on each side, and all you've got are just frames, just like just everything's frozen. You can't even see your tank. You're just like, heal me. Just keep clicking your heal. Hopefully it'll heal me.
Yeah, and MMOs that provide any, even if it's a small system, to engage in larger PvP in open world, 10v10, 20v20, they don't have the pre-thought to think about how the different class mechanics work. And I'll use SWTOR as an example in that ranged anything became the class to go to when you were doing that kind of stuff, because you couldn't go melee. You couldn't get close.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that developing wise and mechanics wise, they're trying to address here with CUs. They're trying to allow every class that they've come up with to participate somehow, to not just be a Black Knight that's just standing there, waiting for the group to charge before he goes in, because he's going to die if he does.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on everywhere within all the different systems that interact with each other in this game that I think are allowing you to be a melee character, go in, or to be a scout and get close, or to even be let's say an abbot, and play a middle range role where you're healing and doing melee damage. And you don't see that almost ever.
Well, and that's one of the other things that I really like that they're doing that most modern, pretty much, I don't know of any modern MMOs that do that, which is having the different realms with the asymmetrical classes. And you really can't do that outside of RVR, and I understand why. I mean, you can't have raiding groups trying to compete against each other, and they've got different builds, and so they may or may not be able to do the same amount of DPS, and then someone's mad because that realm has a build that can crank out 100,000 DPS and they can only crank out 90,000 DPS, so on and so forth. Unless you've got the balancing that's not based on one class versus one class, that's based on groups versus groups, you really can't do that, in my opinion. And I think that's one thing that they've started to do that I would like to see other people do is the unbalanced, not unbalanced, but the asymmetrical classes. Having each realm be different in an actually significant way. Other games have certainly done that, but modern MMOs, not really.
And we always go back to SWTOR. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's one of the last.
Because you've played it a lot, yeah.
Yeah. But they started, in their development with an asymmetrical system.
They promised.
They promised it, and they couldn't do it. And so they switched to a completely symmetrical system. And it didn't work either. So
and it's just, you don't, as Vellic said, it's not a 1v1 geared game, so you don't need exactly balanced classes in all realms.
They don't.
As long as the general dynamics of the groups works and is still balanced and the fights are not one-sided, I'm fine with the classes not being all balanced to the T and to the last digit. If they are generally balanced, I'm fine with that.
There's a thing I kind of see with CU in relation to PvE games or PvE situations, in that PvE tends to have roles. You have tanks, you have DPS, you have healers. You have those too in PvP, but not usually as much. And in this case, they have a large number of classes, each with very specific abilities and roles and utilities, and it almost feels like a PvE system designed for PvP in that sense. And it's not just about I do this amount of damage and I have this kind of CNC to prevent you from doing your amount of damage to me.
Yeah.
It's much more team based. It's much more oriented. Each class has a design to it. It's not a number design. It's an ability design.
Mm-hmm.
It's a utility design.
And this is something that honestly I would really kind of like to see emphasized perhaps a little more in Camelot Unchained. And I think it goes a little bit towards something that Sacrix said about not wanting his character to essentially be a set of stats that pretty much plays itself, and he just picks the stats and then you click the abilities and it pumps it out. He wants something to where he's more involved. And some modern MMOs have really gone to doing that. I think instead of just swing the sword, and you're waiting on your random damage to pop out and everything.
Yeah.
One way that I think CU can still have a lot of that is by the interaction of the different classes and by the group mechanics. And they've kind of flirted with that a little bit, but we haven't seen much in a long time. But it's something I think they can have in the game, is better group dynamics where, okay, sure, the combat's a little bit slower paced, but so you're not going to be like, oh, he uses a fireball, let me quick reflect that, you're not going to be doing that action combat kind of crap, but instead they can have it be tactical to the degree where you're like, okay, well, this class has very good synergy with this class. That doesn't mean you just walk with each other, but you actually need to be using abilities and doing certain things in relation to each other. So you're not just hitting your own rotation of abilities, but maybe you're working cooperatively with some other people. You've got people who buff abilities that know that I'm eventually going to be doing a really powerful snipe shot, and maybe they've got like a quick damage buff. So I can let people know I'm going to do that, and they go ahead, hit their buff, and then I pump out damage. There are things like that and rituals and stuff like that that I think can potentially make the game more interactive and not just about yourself, but about the group.
I think one of the things that is also gonna dilute these stats play yourself, basically the stats play your character, is the fact that you build your skills. So no two skills are gonna be the same. You will have the guides saying that this skill is the best or whatever, but at the same time, each character will have different stats. Each abilities are going to be built differently, at least slightly, because no two character will have the same banes and boons unless you redo your character once the guides come out, because people have been theory crafting for the last 6 months and coming up with the best Dark Knight or the best Blackguard build with the exact boons and banes, the exact points you need, the exact stat points you need, and the exact way of building your abilities. Unless you remake your character, each character is going to be different, and so each ability are going to play differently, and they are going to react to each other differently. So that we had a meeting, and I was trying to explain that the rock paper scissors system is not just this class counters this class counters this class is better against this or this. It's spells and abilities are gonna counter each other at the component level, not the whole skill, but the components themselves are going to counter each other. So if you have one of your skill component that counters one of the other skill components but not the others, you're still going to take damage, for example, or you're still going to get the debuff. So I think there is going to be a hybrid system of, as Sacrix said, you're going to have some elements of action MMO in the fact that you have physics. So you're going to be able to react to spells and abilities being casted to defend yourself or defend others. But you will have the classic MMO of the slower paced combat also.
Yeah. One last thing that I have that I think kind of goes into that combat playstyle sort of thing and making it more interesting than just I swing my sword is, and it's something that I think is also very new to the modern MMO genre, which is physics. having not physics in general. Obviously, most games have some sort of physics, but having the different character physics, the different building physics, the very high level of physics and everything with projectiles and bodies. And this is one thing that I honestly can almost guarantee we're going to see in some future MMOs. Crowfall has already adopted it, so as we talked about in our Is Crowfall copying Camelot Unchained episode, they've already added that to their list of things. So maybe not all the same physics, but adding some physics stuff in there like that. So I can almost guarantee we're going to see more MMOs in the future, because that's one of those things I feel like when you add a system like that to an MMO, then other ones feel like they have to, or they're going to be outdated. They're going to be like, crap, they did that, so now we have to do it.
And that's not just a mechanical addition to a game. That's even a visual addition to a game, and goes in line with providing. A lot of people like to provide the best possible graphics they can for their games. So we'll start seeing that, I think, in general, whether or not CU or Crowfall do well with it.
But yeah, and that's also something, though, that I think will really help the combat system. You know, being able to physically block a ranged attack coming in, being able to move behind a tree so it hits the tree. I think that kind of thing will really help to keep the combat interesting and make you feel involved. To comment on what's going on in chat, I do agree that the combat we've seen in game, in the video clips and stuff they've shown, is probably not the game speed we're going to have at launch. Yeah. I think it will probably be a little bit faster than that. I'm hoping it's not going to be a lot faster than that, to be honest. But I do suspect it's going to pick up and be a little bit quicker than that, because it is very slow in the clips that they've released. But I personally enjoy the slower combat. I don't like, honestly, if they released it with the speed of stuff we've seen right now, I would be fine with that.
I don't think I don't think they're going to. It's an option, honestly. They're not gonna go, because the way their system is built, you can't have the extremely fast-paced combat you have now, which has been shaped. People tend to forget that's been shaped by Korean MMOs. Yeah. Western MMOs have never been that fast-paced. Action-based MMOs are purely Korean origin. So having a slower paced, people keep mistaking slower and slow. You can go slower than most MMOs have been lately, and not be as slow as EQ was, for example, which the combat in EQ was very slow. I would be fine with that kind of speed. I don't have a problem with slow combat either, but I think it's going to be a good compromise between those two.
I think there's going to be enough slowness to it to allow people to react, because fast-paced combat sometimes is very reactionary, in that there's not a lot of time to think about what you're doing. You just kind of have to do it. And this, I think, is geared to at least giving you some time to, okay, what's my next move? You have that moment to decide, and then you go into it.
Yeah, and I think that's important for me. Well, it's like, for instance, I really like turn-based strategy games. I really hate real-time strategy games. I don't like them. I don't like feeling like it's a strategy game, but I don't have time to think about what I'm doing and plan things out. Instead, I'm just like, okay, I have my rotation, my build. I know I build this here, this here, this here. Crank out these 3 troops, this here, this here. Oh, he's doing that. I'm going to do this and this and this and this. Click these buttons and these hotkeys. That, to me, is not a strategy game. That is it's irritating to me. And I will admit part of it's because I'm not very good at it. But I really like the slower paced game content where I can sit there and really think about something and be like, okay, I'm shooting this. Now you've got these 3 guys coming up over here, so I'm going to switch to this arrow and fire that. I like that sort of thing. I like being able to analyze what's going on. That honestly gets me more into the game, because I can sit there and think about it, and instead of just being like mash, 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 smash, 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 jump, 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 smash, smash, jump, jump, smash, jump, jump, smash. I get to sit there and really think like, okay, what's going to be best here? What am I doing? I should use this ability. Okay, now I should use this one. The really fast paced combat, to me, it's not. I won't say it's boring because it's so fast you can't be bored. But I almost feel like it's fast to make you think you're not bored, if that makes sense.
The thing is, fast-paced, action-based MMO will not work with the CU, not
Oh,
even
no.
because of the crowd, but because of the way the combat system is geared to become. Fast-paced, action-based MMO works because you have a limited amount of abilities to choose from that are exactly calibrated to counter other abilities. With the amount of diversity you will have in skills and the number of skills you will be able to have on your bar, a fast-paced like we've seen now will not work because you will never have enough time to decide to react with the correct ability to the abilities being thrown at you.
I think
Mhm.
the pace of any sort of PvP system, whether it's fast or slow, is also defined by the scale of the PvP. If you're doing a one-on-one kind of situation, or even a two-on-two, you're kind of reacting like, okay, this is this class. If this class does exactly this move, which you know that move, it's my job to react this way. Versus large scale, you're not interacting that closely with specific classes. You're reacting with a large number of classes all at once. So you need the time to really consider what your next move is because you're not worrying about that rogue who's about to backstab you. You're worrying about the whole of the fight going on in front of you or around you. And so quicker paced MMOs or quicker paced combat, I think, are geared more towards the small scale PvP, MOBAs, and just in general, like fives or threes or 2v2s or whatever, versus team large scale combat has to be slower paced.
Mhm. Now, moving on to the next section, again, like y'all's and chat's opinions on this, as always. What are things, things we've talked about and any other features that you really do and really do not want to see future and I guess newer projects, MMO projects, uh, doing kind of adapting from Camelot Unchained? We've kind of already talked about this with some of the features, but just to kind of rehash that, what are some things you do want to see become more prevalent in the future?
Um, that what I do want to see become more prevalent is the communication.
Yeah.
That's for me. That's the main thing, and the thing that I really don't want to see, mostly because I'm a dual interest player, is the purely PvP game. I think we have more than enough PvE players to have more than just Pantheon as a purely PvE game. I know it's becoming fashionable to say PvE is boring because you're fighting an AI and PvP is more interesting because you're fighting humans. But PvE has its interests also, and I think there's enough of a crowd uh, to have a purely PvE game. And I
Mm-hmm.
really want to see Pantheon succeed for that, to prove that purely PvE game don't need PvP to succeed.
Yeah, one thing I forgot what I was going to say on that. Um, yeah. Anyway.
I can agree with Chris on that. I think they're the three trinities of an MMO: the crafting, PvP, and PvE. I'll throw in four if we throw in RP just for Vellic.
Just for
Um,
that, like,
but a game can exist without RP, and many do. Um, and we see now more recently a lot of games specializing in one with a sub specialization or even equal specialization into
Mm-hmm.
PvP in crafting or PvE in crafting. Crafting kind of supports those two. So I'd love to see more games kind of involve less of the Trinity, maybe just two
hmm
or even
yeah.
just one in some cases. And then when we get to crafting, we just talk about like open world sandbox type of things. There are games that do that already. They're not MMOs at that point to me,
Yeah.
um, but seeing more of the two, either PVE in crafting or PvP in crafting, push forward and start to make some really interesting things.
And let's
that's
be
what I
honest,
was gonna-
it's much easier to balance a purely PvE or purely PvP game than trying to balance a game for half PvP, half PvE, where the classes and the abilities need to be balanced completely differently.
Oh, that's absolutely true, and that's actually what I was gonna say. Not that specifically, but more what Brand was gonna say. What Brand said is more what I was gonna say. That I think the smartest thing they did, one of the smartest things they did when they announced Camelot Unchained and started pushing it out, was not just making it a PvP game, but making it really an RVR and crafting game, where those two elements are both immensely prominent in there, because that goes back to some of the concerns Sacrix had about population and getting enough people in the game. If you're just trying to appeal to RVR players who like this kind of particular style of RVR, then that is kind of a problem. But since they've been able to broaden it to include things that really do center around RVR, like having the scouts, people that want to go in and play scouts and feel useful and important. They're not big into the RVR, but they're not quite crafters, so they want to go and enjoy some of the other stuff, but still enjoy the game. We can get new population from that, and it helps to enrich the RVR itself, even if they're not the focal point of the game. Healers, making healers really powerful. Again, they're part of the PvP, but they're not necessarily focused all the time in the combat, but because the healers are powerful and necessary as a part of the game, that gets new types of population into the game. And the biggest one, crafters, because they're going to be so vital to the game. And making crafting, really the way I see Camelot Unchained is not as a PvP game. I don't see it as an RVR game. I see it as an RVR and a crafting game, where both of them are pillars that make up the entire game. Without one of them, the game itself would probably end up sucking.
Yes, I agree.
Now,
Well said.
I do want to see the communication and the transparency in other games. For me, I played Champions Online when it came out, and I think that was the biggest example I have of a game where the developers were absolute garbage at communicating anything. They were absolute trash at it. They were horrible at it, and it actually drove me from the game. I was so mad at things that they just would not communicate or tell us, that even though I was still kind of enjoying the game, I just quit. I couldn't stand it. The community was so hostile towards them that I just quit because I wanted nothing to do with it. It drove me nuts.
Trying.
Yeah. In the case of PvP, I would like to see other games start really branching out with the types of things they provide. And I get this often. I talk about PvP a lot in the forums, and a lot of the response generally is, well, you don't need a reason to PvP. Yeah, you don't. You can go out and kill things and find people to kill on your own motivation, but every MMO has a PvP system, and they provide environmental things for PvP to be encouraged. I think that encourage and just a small amount of funneling is necessary in any PvP system. And most of the time, MMOs use the same type of things, the same type of
Gimmicks.
carrot dangling from the rod in front of you. Come up with some new stuff. Like there's a whole bunch of things that Camelot Unchained is doing that you don't really see, that they're providing many different ways to engage in PvP. And I want to see that flourish more in other MMOs.
Yeah. There's other things that we already mentioned. I would love to see more of the old school testing instead of some of this early release stuff, or soft launches for games and stuff like that. I don't want to see any of that kind of stuff.
No.
I really prefer the old school method of just having thorough and actual testing that people get in on and give some feedback on. Small populations of people giving feedback, not everyone just blanket invited to everything. And developing the game that way. I also want to see, targeting the niche market. But now, what are some things that people do not want to see really branch out into other games? This might be hard for us because we're huge Camelot Unchained fanboys. But what are some things we really don't want to see popping up in other games? And I can start off here. Hiring issues. I will say, if there's anything about CSC that has really gotten up my rear end, it is the hiring issues.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't know why CSE decided to set up their office where they did. I'm sure there was a very good reason for it. I'm not questioning that, but it's not really my business to any degree. But yeah, they probably should have tried to set up an alternative office sooner.
Sooner,
and
yeah. They
that's
would
something
probably
I
have
don't.
shaved off almost a year of development if they had been
Yeah.
willing to open it earlier than that.
Location.
And I can understand why they wanted everybody together and everything. I do, but in future projects, and that's one of my fears with crowdfunding is that people that start up the crowdfunding, they don't have these networking and fiscal backing to be able to get these projects funded and crewed and staffed like they really should. And so that's something I definitely don't want to see in projects. I know that's kind of a cop out, but
and I think you actually kind of touched on the whole point of that is because CSE is very much enlarged an indie development gaming studio with some pretty high-name people running it. But it is an indie development studio, and
it doesn't have the funds of that.
Yeah, and I've kind of been a part of that in the past, coming out of college and stuff. Even in California, in LA, with 6 or 8 of us, some people were as far down as San Diego, 100 miles away. It just became very difficult to do things over the phone, on the internet, and we very much wanted to try to find a place, and you're just limited based off of funds, based off of starting out. You can't just go to the best place possible and open up a shop and start things. So I think part of that, in their regard at least, is they had a choice budgetary wise to where to start, and they picked the place they could.
Yeah, Rhaegar said that Mythic started a base in the same place, and that it worked for them. But I think there is a difference there. Mythic also had other
more
backing.
Than a decade ago.
Well, and they also had other backing. They weren't crowdfunded.
Yes.
As somebody else said, crowdfunding is Sacker said crowdfunding is all new territory. So I can see how a lot of developers would go, okay, well, you've gotten this crowdfunding, but you don't have a publisher. I don't want to move out there and possibly have these issues. Also, CSE wants senior developers, which is something of an issue too, because newer developers might be willing to make that move, might be willing to take that chance, but some of the senior developers, unless they're really they got to have a lot of faith going in to really want to move from a big development area out there
and that's kind of another thing tying into what I just said, and they are an indie development studio looking for AAA level developers. So,
and I understand why they are. I applaud that they are, but it is definitely an issue. My other one, let's see. I already brought this up really, but I still am very iffy on crowdfunding for major MMO projects. MMOs are freaking expensive.
Yes,
I'm cool about crowdfunding for niche market games and smaller projects and true indie studios that can't get fiscal backing for games and stuff. I am a bit wary of massive gaming projects being funded through crowdfunding. It is something that I'm not entirely 100% comfortable with, and I think the main point here is, while I don't necessarily want companies to stop doing it, I don't want that to become the primary method of game development. I really don't. I want that to stay as a small quantity of the game development. I want mostly to continue as it is now, and maybe occasionally a game company does crowdfunding, but that is not, what 50 or 80% of the games are being developed by, because I think that's going to lead to an entirely new set of problems.
There are different levels in that.
For MMOs, I wouldn't mind. Because again, I have a problem with MMO publishers and their short-sightedness on the issue of releasing the game with different features and releasing the game too early to have a return on investment. So for MMOs, I would prefer seeing smaller scale MMOs that take longer to arrive to the scale of big AAA MMOs because of crowdfunding, rather than seeing huge AAA MMOs dumbed down like we have now released too early and which are not interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of in between on that. I think crowdfunding has a place. I think if you're starting a game with crowdfunding, like you have $0 and you have an idea with a couple of friends, uh, you kind of have to, but at the same time, that's probably not the best way to go about it. And I think
Yeah.
in this case, Mark even threw down quite a big of his own personal investment
More than
towards
$2 million. Yeah.
towards this. So he didn't just start crowdfunding. You know,
Yeah.
he paid out of his own pocket initially. So
Yeah. Now, what other things, and again, this is for chat as well, do you have that CU has done or that CU has as features and stuff that you don't necessarily want to see future games trying as much? You don't, you don't think will fit for other games?
One obvious one, making your own engine.
See, I actually kind of would prefer that more games invest the time to make an engine that really fits their game if they're doing something that is very demanding.
Yes, it depends. It depends on what the game is geared toward. Yes, for CU it was adapted. For example, I'm really fine. Yeah, I'm perfectly fine Pantheon using Unity because they don't have the same necessities. They don't have the same constraints as CU had. No engine could do what CU was planning on doing. But now there's an engine for that because they're going to market it. They're going to sell it.
Well,
so
maybe,
there is an
maybe
engine. They did say it's in the plans.
Oh.
I don't know if they're going to do it right away. They're probably going to keep it under their
well, it makes
their
sense. I
arm for a
mean,
while.
after spending all that time developing it, they should probably try to
Market
license it to other people.
Mhm.
I'm very much in the same boat of if your game has a very specific demand, you make a very specific engine for that demand because that's what, and we always go back to it, that's what SWTOR did not do.
Yeah,
they
and
bought
they really
a
should have.
game, They bought an engine that wasn't even finished yet, to my knowledge, and then updated it to the best that they could for what they needed, and the engine couldn't handle anything. So
Yeah, I agree. I think that's it's definitely. I guess I agree with both of you. It's something I don't want to see every company making their own engine, but it's something I think should happen a little more often than it does in modern MMOs. Like I really feel like a lot of that's part of the problem. Is a lot of MMOs become kind of generic because they're just taking engines that have been made already and they're going, okay, what can we do on this engine? Well, we'd like to do this. No, that's not going to work. We can't do that. So instead, we're just going to do this stuff, and we'll try to do that, and we'll get as close as we can, and then whatever else. And it becomes kind of wishy-washy, and they do the best they can, like SWTOR. They do the best they can, but in the end of the day, they bought an engine that can't really do what they originally promised.
right.
And now to SWTOR, some of that I still think was a bit of a problem because they were really very new to MMOs and they had not done that before. So they're like, "Oh, sure, we can do that." Oh, whoops, no, we can't. So I do think that that's a complex issue, but it's one that I think probably should be more development of original tools, not just engines, but original development tools for games and stuff than we do see.
Yeah. I think some engines are more universal depending on the code used to build them, where some are defined very specifically to do very specific things. And so if you are, for future developers trying to make something that's a little bit different, at least be willing to use something that's more open and more customizable.
Yeah. Well, and I think for general, like a PvE focused MMO, for instance, would probably be perfectly fine on most generic sort of engines. There's probably not a lot of things they couldn't do for raids and things like that. So for a lot of different games, you're not going to need that sort of custom performance for different things. unless they're trying to, be crazy and have massive raids or something specific that they're really looking for. I don't know, but
40-man raids.
100-man raids. What?
50
We can't even
I've
get
had
together a
50
40-man.
50 to 60-man raids in EQ.
You need 20 tanks in order to complete this boss.
Yeah. Or single server PvE games. I know I can dream. I love the idea of single server MMOs. I hate
server anything.
I hate that that's not a thing that gets done as often, but
yeah,
I understand there are problems with doing that, but it's in my fantasy world, every MMO would be a single server MMO, and
yeah. Not
Anyway.
gonna happen anytime soon.
No
population issues there, huh?
Anyway,
That's true. Also,
I do want to thank everybody for coming out. I think we've about exhausted our topic for now.
Longer
and
episode.
that's been a long episode.
It has. A very good participation from chat. Thank you all for giving us some feedback and some thoughts. Especially Sacrix, who was
Sacrix
dominated
was
half
very
the
active
channel
today.
He had coffee today, I guess. But anyway, yeah, thanks everybody for coming out and everything. We will see you in
2 weeks.
2 weeks. I'm not sure what the next episode is about. I was going to take a look real quick.
You know it, just don't remember.
I've got it written down. I was going to take a look real quick before we go, if I can find it. Camelot Unchained folder. So much stuff in here. So much stuff. Go away, stupid pop up. I need. Well, there we go. All right. No, that's not it. I found it. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Next episode. Ooh.
Uh-oh.
Next episode is going to be about physics, collision, specifically looking at collision detection, whether or not there are problems, issues with griefing, how they can deal with some of that, and different solutions for buildings and player collision and all that kind of stuff. And the different problems is brought up in other games and can bring up in these games. And we're going to talk a little bit more about physics in general. I had to stop because the next one on my list is Beta 1 update ? So we'll slide that one probably down one.
Yeah.
We are getting close to my Beta 1 prediction date. I've only got a couple weeks left. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah,
now, so.
You have 2 weeks and I have 1, so
I still have a month, so.
All right. Anyway, thank you all for coming out, and we will see everyone hopefully again in 2 weeks.